today we're lucky enough to have Jean-Luc and his team, and they've done some pretty awesome stuff with design. He's going to give himself a much better introduction, but he's worked with some pretty awesome companies, small ones like McDonald's, American Cancer Society, L'Oreal, Pfizer, a bunch of other stuff too. And I couldn't be more excited to have you and your team here, and just the way that you conduct yourself and everything. So I'm gonna shut up, sit down, and you take it over.
All right, so thank you guys so much for coming, and also I wanted to thank Selena for hosting us. I also want to give a big thanks for my team, which I'll spotlight in a bit. This is all of us. We call this the cult, but it didn't always start off this way. Matter of fact, this is all quite recent. We've grown from 1 to 6, 1 to 5.5 within the past year. And previously, I was kind of just brainstorming about like, how do you start an agency that's remarkable? How do you get noticed? You know, what can you do that's just like groundbreaking, that gets in the history books? So to show you how insane I am, I woke up 4 o'clock in the morning one day, and I was like, I have an idea. The city that I'm in, which was Allentown, Pennsylvania, has a shitty logo. What if I redesigned their logo, and I got people to like follow the page, and and maybe like the city would grow normal traction, and they would be like, you know what, like this logo, we like it, like we can vibe with this. So I made this presentation about the city's logo, and I called it Love Allentown and Te Amo Allentown. Can you hear me? Oh, the microphone. Oh. How about now? Now I have a little deep voice. Smooth jazz. Whoa, and we got reverb too. All right, so I woke up one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, all right, let me just redesign the city's logo. I'll make a big presentation. I'll put it online. It'll grow traction. And next thing, the mayor is gonna be like, I like that logo. Let me buy it. I don't know. This was before the logic of like understanding how business works. And so I made the presentation, and then that it did get some few likes, maybe like 12. And then I was like, okay, how do I get this noticed? And how do I like grow and just get a name for ourselves? So I took things to the next level. And so I put the logo on a t-shirt, and I put the logo on my face on body paint. And I went into downtown Allentown, and I just started painting city buildings with the logo and like pro Allentown messages like, hey, amo Allentown, and like, we love you, Allentown. And sure enough, I did get noticed, but I did spend a night in jail. So ironically, some of these buildings include like Starbucks and things like that end up getting managed by what is now one of our clients, which is JLL Real Estate. So again, this whole like arrest story was like 4 years ago, and I'm not condoning it, okay? But you had to start with a punchline, so I figured. So these are some of the clients that we recently worked with. I would say within the past year. So now I'm gonna bring the microphone over to Alejandra.
Hello. So right now we are gonna play like a little guessing game, if you can call it like that. Why can you see this? Like there's someone who can read this. Stop war. And then exactly. And so like these are so primal and basic concepts of design that it's something just as simple as a little line can change the whole meaning of your message. And by saying or by designing things a little bit wrong, it can go completely south. And for example, what is this? A door handle. And what do you do with it? Like how do you control it. Exactly, you twist it. And then you have this shit that you don't actually push it. Like you are trying to pull it because this design in your brain is made for you to grab it and pull it. Like for example, here in Selena's, like their doors are like, I mean, great, because they don't have a handle and then it's just like a door and then you're actually naturally able to push it because you don't have anything to grab on and then pull. So this is something that everyone knows that it's wrong, but there's no one doing anything about it. What's the name of this? It was like a doorman. Norman door.
Yeah, so Norman wrote this book called the Norman, like the design of things. Norman wrote this book called The Design of Things, and so this term is called the Norman door. It's when the doors are poorly designed.
Yeah, because he criticized really bad, like these kind of designs. And so, do you know this guy? Hamilton? No. Come on. Isaac Newton. Okay, and what is he known for? For what? Physics. Let's just leave it at that. But one interesting thing is that he actually designed the color wheel. And so he designed this color light when he was like just playing at his lab with some lights and some prisms. And he actually saw the light coming into like the floor, and then that's how he came up with this. As a designer, as an artist, or people that works with color, you need to be aware of the context that your design is gonna live in, or the context that your design is gonna evolve or expand. Because color is something so subjective that one culture has a meaning for it, and then a culture that is completely and not needs to be like super far away from you has a totally different meaning to it. Like for example, black and white, which is like the basics of it, which one can be related to that, but the other one can also be related to that, depending on the culture that you're in. So black in the Oriental culture, it's just like a normal color, and then white means grave or death. Another example of this is also like red, which here means like danger or like violence. And then in the other side of the world, it means like passion and good luck. So those are some things that you need to be aware of whenever you're designing something. And now I have like a little story to tell you. Because when I was like 8 years old, so I was like in 3rd grade, I had like my first approach with design. You should and you could design your own like notebook covers for your different classes and whatever. So the teacher will be like, okay, so now you can design your cover. And since I was the good one at my class that could like draw and stuff, and I was like really into like kids next door, I think it's called in English, and in Spanish it's called like Los Chicos del Barrio. And so what I did was like I would have like they would commission me to draw them in like the kids next door style. So I would be like, okay, so what do you like? Like, do you like soccer, or like do you like sports, or like are you an artist or whatever? And they would be like, yeah, like this or this or this, and then I will draw them in like this style, but then like add maybe like a little ball, like a soccer ball or whatever, you know. And so I made a lot of money for it, and then I got in trouble for it because like the other moms started complaining about me ripping their kids off, but like which is like, it was like an example of it. And so it was like super quick. It was like my first approach to branding, because it's like having something that represents you and you only, you know. It's like your own personal brand. And that gets us to 5 brand personality types. Because whenever we are getting a brand on board with us, we ask, well, like, what are their product? How is their communication? Like, what do they want to put out there in the world? And then we fit them into one of these 5 categories, maybe even 2, depending on the brand. And more than 2, it's a bit problematic because it's just like the messaging is not clear. But then we have like sincerity, which one brand that it's sincerity could be like, do you want to give an example for that?
And sincerity, she's like calling me on the spot there. All right. So like in sincerity, brand would be like a brand that's trying to build empathy, right? Who's trying to make you feel something. right? You have like Dove campaigns that want you to feel something. You're like bringing it to the personhood. You're doing some storytelling. That's something that's really distinctive about sincerity. And I think a key aspect to talk about the brand personalities is that you have to pick, you have to pick like a personality. You can't just be all of them, right? You got to stick with something, otherwise you're nothing, right? So generally what we advise clients, so we generally do either two of these exercises. Either we go through this and we do the brand personality types. We pick one primary and one secondary. Or we would do like a brand archetype discovery, which would be a little bit more extensive, and talk about that. So these are just like kind of examples of what that looks like, right? So, competence would obviously be showing just like how well thought out something is, right?
Then we have excitement, which one brand that could be like the perfect example of this could be like Red Bull. Like they are all about like this feeling of excitement and this adrenaline pumping feeling. And then we have sophistication, which sophistication could be something like Rolex or maybe Cartier, Gucci. And then we have ruggedness, which is like something that is more, when we were talking about this, again for my Mexican fellows, he was like, what's an example of ruggedness? And I was like, Cementos Cruz Azul. And he was like, no. I don't know what that shit is, no. But then ruggedness, you have like Home Depot or like Cat or Black & Deck, something like that.
We are working on a book called The Branding Commandments. And so what I'd like to do is just give you a sneak peek of some of the content, which might be a little bit less visually stimulating, but hopefully it can touch your intellect in a nice way. Extension commandment. A few things. For one, if you put your brand on everything, it ends up like lowering the value of your brand. It's like, what does the brand stand for? What does the brand do? What makes it distinctive? And so the laws of extension is actually based on dilution, right? You have a liquid, let's just say it's like orange juice. You mix it around with a bunch of other liquids, or you mix it with water, it just becomes less flavorful, right? It becomes less distinctive, less memorable, right? The more concentrated you are, the more memorable you are. So that's one of our first point, is that the easiest way to destroy a brand is to put its name on everything. Next point, contraction. Contraction, right? So the more you concentrate, right, the stronger your brand is, right? So Fred DeLuca, he started a deli. And delis sell just about almost everything, right? They'll sell sandwiches, they'll sell bagels, they'll sell, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and sometimes ice cream and coffee, right? But Fred DeLuca started something differently, and he's with a narrow focus, submarine sandwiches. So the only thing he was focused on is submarine sandwiches, right? How can we make the world's best submarine sandwiches? And when you narrow the focus, there's this like perceived value that perhaps because they only do submarine sandwiches, they're naturally better at them. And so that store now has over 115,000 stores around the world, and it's Subway, right? Howard Schultz did the same thing. He started a coffee shop, and a lot of coffee shops serve just about everything. They got bagels, they got soups, and they got sandwiches and everything. Howard Schultz did it differently, right? Right? He started a coffee shop with a narrow focus, coffee. And and it turned out that it's now one of the most popular shops. It is the most popular shops in the world, which is Starbucks. So there is so much power in concentrating your brand and who and what you do, and also saying no to so many of the things that you don't do. I love this example when it comes to branding. So here we go. We got rock, papers, and scissors, right? We got scissors, rock, and paper. So this is the evolution of a brand, okay? Bet you didn't see that coming. So first, we have a startup. A startup wins and it grows because it has like narrow focus. Narrow focus, it can cut through the marketplace because it's got narrow focus. It is sharp, it is focused, it is limiting by the things that it does, and that's how it wins. Now, a rock company beats a scissors company because it's high growth. They got their systems in place, they're growing, they got clients, You know, they've already had their narrow focus, but now they're just like, you know, they're just kicking butt because they have grown so much traction and they are, you know, growing their brand presence. Then there's paper companies. Now, paper companies just beat rock companies out of sheer mass. So yeah, so scissors cuts paper, right? And so it's not just even in the marketplace. It's also showing who your competition is if you're a scissors company. I mean, paper covers rock, right? So paper covers rock because of sheer mass and because they can do so much things. They have like such a large marketplace. So if you think about the Microsoft of the world, right? What is Microsoft not doing, right? And then rock breaks scissors. So high growth companies can outdo startups, right? So the interesting thing is that, so this is the general growth cycle, right? So we start with scissors, we go to rock, and then we go to paper companies. But what we don't see is that this is also not how you compete. It's your growth cycles. But you don't want to compete against like somebody who's like bigger and stronger and smarter than you. You want to compete against your weakest link. Who can you beat? So your competition cycle is actually the opposite way, right? So if you're a scissor company, you're a startup, your goal is not to like focus on the highest growth companies in the world. No, you go after the Microsoft of the world. You go after these billion-dollar companies that are doing just about everything, and you compare yourself to them, because that's who your competition. You ignore the rock. And if you're a rock company, you ignore the paper, right? You're going after the scissors, right? Because you have the system down, you have the knowledge, and you've been through it all, right? And of course, you know, if you're a paper company, I mean, really, if you're a paper company, you shouldn't talk about anybody, right? Because if you're number one never talks about number two, right? It's only number two that talks about number one. So, but in the same way, you don't want to go after startups, right? Because startups can just like, you know, make circles around you. So does that make sense? Any questions? Questions, comments, concerns? All right. Category. A great thing for a brand to do is to be the first in the market, right? Now, how do you become the first in the market? So a lot of times we think that we need to find a market to enter in. Like, how can we own the shares of that market, right? Like, we're like, okay, let's enter the soda category, or let's enter this thing. The best way to become the first in the market is by going into a market that doesn't exist yet, right? I mean, that seems simple. But however, there's no market there. So if you think about this, there wasn't, like home delivery pizza wasn't a thing, right? Like people got pizza, but home delivery pizza wasn't a market until Domino's came around, and then they started home delivery pizza, right? So previously to that, you know, we could have said, well, we could get in the home delivery pizza business, but it doesn't exist, right? But that's how they became a market leader. Which goes into my next point, that the best thing that happened to Domino's was getting other people to follow same suit and deliver pizza. Because actually competition grows the category and it just helps overall everybody. So the best thing to ever happen to Coca-Cola was Pepsi. Because like, I mean, you think about it, you're just trying to persuade people for high fructose corn syrup water that's just like dyed brown. I mean, brown, right? That's just like obviously toxic, you know? So like, how are you gonna convince the world to like consume this beverage? Well, if you can convince your competitors to help and join you in promoting that category, then you're gonna win something, you know? So branding, invite your competitors in, especially when you're starting a new market or a new market niche. Let's say, you know, for example, like, I mean, new market could be quite easy, right? Like you're trying to get in a tailoring business, right? Well, hey, the tailoring business is huge. Well, how about same day tailoring? You know, you schedule like we come in same day and then we tailor it and then you're you got your clothes fixed, right? So, and then all of a sudden you got a niche that makes you different. One of the key aspects of names is that they should stick out in a sentence. If I want to start a streaming website and I call it like generalstreamingonline.com, that's not going to stick out in a sentence. Oh, just go to generalstreamingonline.com, right? People are gonna like, it's already forgettable, you know? But if you have a name like Netflix, then all of a sudden people remember, and it stands out in the sentence, and it could be the verb. Let's Netflix, right? Netflix and chill, right? The more your brand can own that category and own that verb, then you're doing something right. Generic names are just always a bad thing, right? Like Best Deli Shop, right?
What about General Electric?
Exactly. Terrible name. Yeah.
Personal?
Yeah. General Motors, another terrible name. Yeah. Yeah. So they are successful, but also a few things. They fought a lot harder to get to their success than they would have if they would have had a name like Tesla, or if they would have had a name like Mercedes. The other thing that I want to bring up is that, like, you know, in this SEO world, there are search terms that are searched more often. So the temptation is to name yourself with one of these search terms, which often ends up making you generic. First of all, there's 2 points to make. That for one, branding is when a brand is successful, it's memorable, right? It doesn't always necessarily mean that a great brand is going to like live forever or always be successful, right? It's kind of generic. It ends up having to compete with all the others based off of those generic keywords. So what is great is if somebody knows your name and they can find you by typing your name. How oftentimes, you know, if your name is General Electric and you're starting out as a company, do you know how hard it is to get you to show up on Google with your word being General Electric? I mean, you think about how many millions of people are just trying to optimize their website on the name like General Electric, right? But if you're Johnson & Johnson, or if you're, you know, Mercedes-Benz, you know, you have like a distinct market. So when it comes to a marketplace, I mean, I think also a great name would be like Amazon, right? Because Amazon doesn't mean marketplace. It just means like the Amazon jungle. You know, it's like there's things happening in the jungle. Go ahead.
So the company I work for, I think, has a bad brand name, but like, if I were to tell you it, you wouldn't know how to spell it. That's the problem. It's called Link. L-I-N-G-Q. It's a language learning app.
L-I-N-G-Q.
Right? I said Link. Some customers call it Link Q, but we call it Link. Right? So there's number one, there's a mismatch there. But the CEO is very attached to the name. It's like a baby. So how?
No worries.
How would you go about persuading him to be open to changing it?
Here we go. My next slide is gonna slightly cover this topic. So mortality. A lot of business owners have this idea that their brand name is gonna last through the ages. And I really, you know, think that what we should recommend is that, like, actually, you know, sometimes it is the actual best thing to kill the brand. But I wouldn't start like that with your CEO. I would start like, perhaps what we should do is do some A/B testing on some landing pages on seeing what can increase conversion based off of the name. Because you will also be able to tell that's not going to impact search results, by the way. Because I think there's a big problem with not being able to find you, right? Like if a client is not able to find you, it's like almost not being able to see the sign, and a business with no sign is a sign of no business. So, but again, I don't know. Is it a software?
Yeah.
Yeah, and is the software in a marketplace?
Is it in a marketplace?
Yeah, like how do you sell the software?
Google Play, Apple, App Store.
Okay. Yeah, so I would just, I also think what's really important, so now that you have this really interesting, unique brand name, that that you put like extremely searchable terms as part of the name in addition to it. So I'm actually kind of going against the opposite. Since his name is so unique and so like obscure, to just make sure you're actually findable, right?
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to drown yourself with that. Yeah, and you call it Link.
And it's a language app.
Yeah, but it's just a Q. Is it a capital Q?
Capital Q.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I kind of Ling Q. A Ling Q is kind of nice.
If you were to spell it that way.
The problem is if I tell someone, if I just say, oh, check it out, link Q or link, you're not going to be able to know how it's spelled.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with Ling Q, if you say Q, you could get enough. You could at least type in Q, and hopefully once you build enough domain authority, that Google could recommend. Oh, it's with the G. You know, I think when you say link, I think, you know, you have millions and millions of other people that are called link.
Like the Zelda character.
That's what I think.
Right.
I think of Zelda.
Yeah. In defense to misspellings is actually quite a lot of things are misspelled, right? Twitter is a misspelling, right? Right, we're talking about tweeting. What else? Kleenex. Kleenex is a misspelling, right? But it has the idea of the word clean in it. So sometimes misspellings aren't bad, right? Sometimes misspellings are actually really, really, really great brand name and can own the product category. The way you say, hand me over the Kleenex. You don't look at the package and see if it's a Kleenex before you pass it over, you know? So it doesn't necessarily need to represent the category, but sometimes if it represents perhaps like an attribute of the brand, it's nice, you know? First of all, how do you guys feel? Was this good? Was this good? Was this like valuable? Yeah. Yeah?